I used to hang out with my cousin a lot. We were both 10-year-old males at the time of this encounter, and I'm now 33. It has stayed with me ever since. We would mostly spend our youth roaming the streets, not causing trouble but kicking footballs around fields and climbing, hanging out with other kids our age. The typical stuff before iPads and Netflix became commonplace. One day we had decided to go and explore a part of town that we had never explored before. It meant going through alleyways and back streets. The trail would actually end approximately 2 to 3 minutes from my house, which was a safe part of the neighborhood. It was a sunny day out, albeit not too warm, and my cousin and I had been walking for what seemed like miles. The journey that we had planned was supposed to go on for longer, but we had got bored and decided to take a detour home. The detour involved cutting through an alleyway that looked a little bit like the Coronation Street, Ginnell, if anybody's familiar with the TV show. To the left of us were terraced houses, and to the right of us, steel fences with sharp points to deter any would-be thieves. We continued up here, and soon enough, one of the kids from our school lived there, and his mom shouted, "What are you boys doing here?" We ran, and I don't know why. We just didn't like her son, and her tone was accusatory. As we ran, we bumped into another kid. "Don't go that way," he said, as his voice trailed off as he ran farther and farther away from us, down the opposite end of the alleyway. We shrugged and continued on. It got darker with the trees and foliage, but we soon emerged from the alley, and that's when we saw the lone boy. A boy aged between 10 and 12 stood there. His eyes were empty, and he had a vacant look on his face. Well, the half of his face that we could see well enough. Above his mouth was covered with a veil, somewhat like a Halloween mask of some description. Except it was June. Halloween was months away. As we got closer, we noticed the boy had a kitchen knife in his hands. I mean a fully real stainless steel kitchen knife, both hands on the handle. The sunlight made the blade glisten. We cracked a joke. "You cooking outside?" But he looked at us blankly. No emotion, nothing. We were too freaked out to move, and that's when we realized that he hadn't moved either. Not a muscle. We saw him blink, but physically the knife hadn't been raised or pointed at us, just held closely to his chest, blade pointing upwards. We figured that we should get away because instincts told us that this was weird and a bit freaky. Going back down the alley didn't seem like a safe option. Being stuck in an alley with a strange kid with a knife didn't seem smart. In front of us was a road on a steep hill. It was our best bet. We walked up to the top of the hill, keeping an eye on the kid. And the top of the hill was only 2 to 3 minutes from my house in terms of distance. At last, we felt safe. As we looked back down the hill, the lone kid had put the knife by his leg, now holding it with one hand but remained in the exact same spot, and stared right back up at us, expressionless. We told our parents what had happened, and they called a local community enforcement team to scout the area. Apparently the kid was found with the knife, but we never heard why he was there or what he was doing. 23 years after it happened, it's still on my mind. I'm still relatively new to Reddit, so I don't really know too much about it. I am a fan of YouTube videos, though. When I'm doing things around the house, I like to listen to readings on YouTube of Reddit stories, both hilarious and terrifying ones. One day, as I was cleaning, the video that I was listening to had finished and automatically played the next one, which was a stalker reading story. After hearing other people's encounters, I decided that maybe I am ready to share one of mine too. I posted a story of mine earlier and it got a lot of positive reinforcement, so I think I'm going to talk about another. This is an encounter that went on over the span of maybe a month, and then continued on from a distance for the next 2 years. This is a pretty long story, so I'm sorry if it gets boring. Growing up, I lived in a small town. Now, I don't mean footloose small with a mere 14,000 people. I mean really small with only 1,000 people when I moved there in first grade. I didn't really make any close friends all throughout my school days, and I wanted to get pretty far away. The farthest my parents would let me go for school, though, was a few states over to study Japanese at a private university in Ohio. My freshman year flew by. I met a ton of new people, and my Facebook exploded with friend requests from both domestic and international students alike. Not remembering everyone I met, I accepted them all. I was young and excited to make new friends, and I ended up making a lot of good friends. I was actually kind of, dare I say it, popular. By my second year, the leader of my department had deemed me the big sister of the program. It was a small program, but I was usually the one that people would turn to for help. I was good at what I was studying, and I was proud of it. There was a building on campus that was open 24 hours for students. It had couches, armchairs, and coffee tables on one half, and tables and regular chairs on the other, separated by a big fireplace. There were also 2 little secluded loft areas for small groups that wanted a little more privacy. People would go there to study or just hang out with friends. There was a cafe attached to it, so it made it ideal for a study spot. Coffee plus students equal productivity. Because I am a coffee fanatic, some might say a coffee snob, I was always in the study building where I had access to coffee when I wasn't in class or catching those oh-so-rare hours of sleep. The only problem, well, if you can call it a problem, was that because I was the go-to person for the program, I would only sit down for a few minutes before someone would come up and sit with me, be it to study or to chat, usually the latter. When the end of the sophomore year was rolling around, the dreaded exam time was approaching quickly. I was studying abroad my junior year, and I wanted to leave my school on a positive note. I was desperately trying to get some studying done, but people kept sitting to chat with me in the study building. And don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. Oh my gosh, I'm like so popular that I can't even stand it. No, not that. I loved my friends, but they couldn't really grasp the concept of silent studying. A few of them were already done with exams and just wanted to talk. I decided to try my luck in the library, instead of heading to the study building. I went to the library and sat down on one of the little tables by a big window. I was on a roll. I had gone through quite a few big projects and finished writing one of my presentations. I sat up a little straighter and stretched out my arms in front of me, letting out a satisfied sigh. A voice from behind me suddenly said, "You're working hard?" The library wasn't a popular space to study. Everyone usually went to the study building or got private rooms on the other side of the building, so the sudden voice behind me made me jump a bit. Yeah, I replied. It was a Chinese guy on the heavy side, a few inches taller than me. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, I don't remember his name. So, for this story, I'll just call him Chen." "Yeah, we met at orientation. We're friends on Facebook," he said. His English was good, but sometimes his accent was hard to understand. He still didn't give me his name, but he looked at me so expectantly that I felt bad for not remembering him. "Oh, yeah," I blurted out. "It's nice to see you. How are your finals going?" We talked a little about school and some other small talk. But it was getting late though, so I excused myself to go back to my share house for the evening. Next day, I avoided the study building altogether, hoping to get the same amount of studying done that I had done the day before. I walked quietly into the hall, glancing around. I didn't see Chen, so I went to sit at my table from the day before and I sat down. It wasn't 15 minutes before he appeared though, sitting down next to me and trying to strike up a conversation. I was a little annoyed, but I stayed polite. I excused myself after about an hour of awkward conversation with the stranger, and I gave up for the evening. It was still early, but I grabbed some friends and we went out for dinner at a local diner. The next day, I decided to try again. I went into the library and, much to my dismay, I saw him sitting at my favorite table. At first, I was annoyed, but then I thought, wait a second, he is here first, so I can just grab a different table and he won't notice. I walked to the other side of the room, passing rows and rows of bookshelves, sitting down at a corner table. If he found me, it would have to have been because he was actively looking. About an hour later, I heard footsteps heading around the quiet room, and then a quickened pace headed straight for me. "Hey!" I groaned internally, but put on a polite smile. "Oh, hey there." He had brought his stuff and sat down across from me. After a painful half hour, I finally gave up and decided to head home. The next day, I decided to talk to the front desk about getting a private room. They were on a different floor, so surely I would be safe there. Nope, he found me. After knocking repeatedly on the door and staring at me, I could no longer pretend that I didn't see or hear him, even with my headphones on. If I waited much longer, I'm sure the other people in the area would be just as annoyed as me, and I didn't want to ruin their study time. I opened the door. "Oh hey, I was actually just getting ready to leave," I lied. "So soon? I was hoping you could check my English paper." "Geez, way to make me feel guilty." Well, I could spare a few minutes." "Cool." He pushed his way in, sitting down at the table. Sighing, I sat back down and took his paper. As I started checking it, he started talking about how he never shared a meal with a girl before, because he thinks it's such an intimate thing. I was checking his paper as quickly as I could, trying to get away from the awkward encounter, so I let out the occasional "uh-huh" and head nod, barely listening. Suddenly, he started pulling food out of his bag from a nearby Chinese restaurant, and he handed me a fork. I'm sitting there thinking, wait, what? He just said that he thinks sharing food with a girl is intimate. Luckily, I was able to form words. "Your paper looks good. I don't see any real English mistakes. I can't stay though. I had plans to eat dinner with some friends. Sorry." I passed him his paper, stood up and laughed, slightly creeped out. I would have blamed it on cultural differences, but I knew a ton of other Chinese kids on campus and none of them were as weird as Chen. In fact, I was close to a lot of the other kids because they were so cool. But Chen was giving off some really scary vibes and I didn't want to see him again. The next day, I decided it would be better to just study at the study building. I would rather be surrounded by chatterbox friends than alone with a creepy stranger. The loft was open when I arrived. You have to climb stairs to get to it, and you can't really tell if anyone is up there, let alone who. Unless you are really trying to look up through the cracks or go halfway up the stairway. Practically giddy with joy, I rush up the stairs and settle into the armchair with a cup of coffee from the cafe. The giddiness of finding the loft open quickly wore off, though as I went into productive mode. I got a lot of studying done, but after about 2 hours, movement downstairs caught my eye. Chen was walking around, looking around at the open floor. I took a deep, quiet breath and tried to push the paranoia down. No big deal, right? Maybe he was tired of the library and wanted to study in this building for a change. For the first time in 2 years. And then I heard it, those awful words. He was asking a group of people I knew if they had seen me, asking about me by name. Luckily, they arrived after me and didn't see me go up into the loft. I was safe. He looked around a little more and finally laughed. The next day, I promised a friend of mine that I would help him with his paper. My friend was 6.5 foot tall, ripped like a quarterback, a phenomenon of a man named Tetsuo. We agreed to meet in the loft at a set time, and I arrived a bit early to make sure that we could actually get the loft, since that they were a bit popular. I was sitting in the armchair when I heard him start coming up the stairs. He was 15 minutes early. My heart dropped when I looked up though. It wasn't Tetsuo. It was Chen. He silently stalked over to the sofa, dropping his things, and sat on the coffee table in front of me. He put a hand on each of my arms of the chair, locking me in, and proceeded to forcefully kiss me. He was bigger than me in both height and weight, so it took a lot to push him off of me. I'm sure that the rush of adrenaline helped. "What are you doing?" I shrieked. "I'm in love with you. I want to be with you. I want you to marry me and move back to China with me and start a family with me." He started to lean in again. I leaned back and tried to push him away. "Get away from me." He leaned back a little but kept his hands on the arms of the chair and his knees on either side of me, locking me in so I couldn't get away. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Did he really ask me what was wrong? Was he stupid as well as crazy? No, just no, get away from me." I tried to wriggle free, but he was stronger than me. "I don't even know you." "But I know you," he said. "I need you. I love you." I was about to scream for help when Tetsuo came pounding up the stairs in a rush. Chen may have been bigger than me, but Tetsuo was way bigger than Chen. He looked right at me. "Are you okay?" I replied saying, "Help me." He started walking towards us and Chen immediately leaned back and let me go. Tetsuo took my hand, pulling me to sit on the sofa right next to him, saying, "You promised to help me with my English paper." I was shaking, but I felt significantly safer with Tetsuo there to help me. He could easily take down Chen if it came to that. Chen didn't leave. He sat in the armchair that I had just vacated and waited. Did he think that Tetsuo would just leave and he could continue to harass me? We finished Tetsuo's paper in about an hour. I took my time explaining certain grammar points and spelling patterns, hoping that we could take long enough and Chen would give up and go away. He didn't. And Tetsuo got up and stood between my stalker and me. "Let's go get some food." He picked up my stuff, took my hand, and pulled me down the stairs without a second glance at Chen. We didn't get dinner for obvious reasons. I didn't have an appetite. Tetsuo did walk me home though, and I told him all about Chen. He said that until finals were over and until I left the university to go home for the summer, he would act as my bodyguard. He said he would take me to all my classes and stay with me outside of class. And he was true to his word. But Chen was always within view. The day of my last exam and the day that I was leaving, I met with Tetsuo in the study building. He looked around and didn't see Chen. With that, I said that I was going to buy a coffee from the cafe. Upon entering the cafe, I rushed to the counter and ordered my usual, a medium black coffee. My blood turned to ice as a voice behind me said, "Make it a large on me." Chen. He was hidden in the cafe, knowing that I would be going there for my coffee like I always did. "No," I told the woman behind the counter. "My usual medium, please. I'll be paying for it myself, too." "Let me," he insisted. There was a little bit of back and forth between us, thinking that we were a couple or something. The woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Oh, just let the guy get you a cup of coffee." I begrudgingly agreed and rushed away as soon as it was in my hand. He was still paying. He caught up to me before I could reach Tetsuo though. So close. There was a pillar in the way though, so Tetsuo couldn't see me. Every time I tried to move, Chen stepped into my path and stopped me. He began begging again. Marriage, family. No way. Tetsuo realized that I was taking too long and came to rescue me, telling Chen to stay away from me. As we were walking away, Chen said, "I won't give up. Not ever. Not even if you marry someone else." I took my last exam and moved back to Illinois that evening. I did find Chen on my Facebook and I blocked him. It wasn't hard to locate him after he had started liking all of my photos. I studied abroad in Japan for a year and had to go back to my uni for my senior year. I had a boyfriend now, who is now my husband. A friend and I had rented a house just off campus, but the internet wasn't going to be set up for another few days, so I went to use the free Wi-Fi at the study building. While I was talking to my boyfriend, who was still in Japan, Chen appeared in front of me. He immediately began to try to talk to me, and then noticed that I was talking on the phone and decided to stand there silently, staring and waiting. My blood ran cold again, and I began to panic, telling my boyfriend in Japanese what was happening. I had told him about Chen while we were in Japan. He told me to run away or to find someone nearby to help me. Instead, the anger in me began to rise. I wasn't some pitiful little girl that needed help whenever something happened. When I was in Japan, I had experiences that demanded I stand up for myself, and this time wasn't any different. I looked at him and said, "I'm talking to my boyfriend. Please leave me alone." He stood there, staring at me for what felt like hours, though I'm sure it was only a few moments. After narrowing his eyes and glaring at my phone, he walked away. I managed to avoid him for most of the year, but I almost always saw him lurking nearby, staring at me. Because I was almost always surrounded by friends though, he never dared to come near and beg me for marriage again. He tried to approach me more than once when I was alone, but I made it clear to him that I would scream if he touched me. I kept to public places and made sure to never, ever be in an empty place. I think it helped that Tetsuo was usually by my side too. I live in Japan now with my husband. It's been 3 years since I graduated, and I haven't seen or heard from Chen since.